I am sitting here, staring at the empty glass in my hand, still unable to process how the happiest day of the year turned into the darkest moment of my life, as my own daughter stood over me, trembling with rage, drenching me in expensive Cabernet Sauvignon while screaming that I had single-handedly ruined everything for her. The silence that followed in the living room was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and as the red wine dripped off my sweater and pooled onto the hardwood floor, I didn't yell, I didn't cry, and I didn't defend myself. I simply looked up at her, felt a cold, jagged sense of clarity wash over me, and I smiled. A smile that seemed to terrify her more than any shout ever could. But I have to ask you, looking at the wreckage of my family, was I really the one who ruined everything, or was I just the one finally pulling the curtain back on a life that had been a lie for 20 years? My name is Elena, and to understand how we reached this point, you have to understand the decade-long charade I kept up for my family, specifically for my daughter, Chloe, who grew up as the golden child in a household built on my silence and my husband David's calculated ego. Everything started when David decided that our image was the only thing that mattered. So we lived in this beautiful, curated home where every piece of furniture had its place, and every emotion was meant to be suppressed if it didn't fit the picture-perfect narrative of our lives. When Chloe was younger, I thought I was protecting her by absorbing all of David's coldness and his constant criticisms, thinking that if I just kept the peace, she would have a happy, carefree childhood. But all I was really doing was teaching her that entitlement was a birthright, and that I was nothing more than a prop in her play. I spent 20 years being the housekeeper, the chauffeur, the therapist, and the punching bag, all while trying to maintain the facade of a loving marriage for the sake of the holidays. And every single Christmas, the pressure reached a boiling point where we would have to act like the happiest family on earth for the extended family and the neighbors. I remember the months leading up to this last Christmas were particularly brutal, because David had received a massive promotion, and decided that we needed to host an even bigger, more ostentatious celebration than usual, forcing me to plan, cook, clean, and decorate until I was practically collapsing from exhaustion. But whenever I asked for help, I was met with icy glares or snide remarks about how I didn't have a real job. And this was my one contribution to the family. Chloe, who was now 22 and home from university, had fully adopted her father's arrogance, treating me more like an invisible assistant than a mother, often demanding things, criticizing my cooking, and rolling her eyes at me if I dared to suggest that she help clear the table or take care of her own laundry. The toxicity was so normalized in our home that I didn't even realize how much I was disappearing until I happened to find David's private bank account statements and messages on a secondary laptop he thought was hidden, confirming that he had not only been cheating for years, but had been siphoning money out of a college fund that I thought was safe, all while blaming me for not saving enough. I felt my heart shatter, but the strangest thing happened. Instead of collapsing, I felt this weird, quiet surge of electricity, a realization that I had spent my entire life trying to satisfy people who didn't even value my existence. And that was the moment I started to plot my exit. I didn't confront them immediately because I wanted to see exactly how far their cruelty would go. So I continued the charade, playing the part of the doting wife and mother while quietly documenting everything, finding a lawyer, and preparing to take back the independence I had surrendered 2 decades ago. As the sun set on Christmas Eve, the house was filled with guests, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and the artificial laughter of people who barely liked each other. But I kept my composure, serving drinks and laughing at jokes that weren't funny, all while watching Chloe and David treat me like a servant in front of our friends. I remember looking at them across the room and realizing that they had no idea who I was anymore. They thought I was a spineless creature who would wither away if they ever left me, completely oblivious to the fact that I had already checked out of their lives emotionally. The next morning, Christmas Day, was the final act, and the tension was palpable as we sat down for what David insisted be a fancy brunch, where he began criticizing the way I'd arranged the centerpieces, loud enough for his parents to hear. Chloe joined in, complaining about the gifts I'd bought her, and how the morning wasn't living up to her social media aesthetic. And for a split second, I looked at them, my family, and I saw 2 strangers who were so consumed by their own superficiality that they couldn't see the woman who had sacrificed everything for their comfort. That is when I decided it was finally time to drop the mask completely, and I calmly informed them that I would not be doing the dishes, that I was no longer going to tolerate the disrespect, and that as of that moment, I was done being the person they thought they could walk all over. That is when the outburst happened. The moment Chloe stood up in a fit of narcissistic rage, grabbed the bottle of wine, and poured it directly over my head while screaming that I had ruined the best Christmas she ever had. And as I sat there, soaked and shivering, I just looked at them and smiled because I knew I was leaving that house forever. So that is the situation I was in. And I had to make a choice. A choice between staying in a prison I helped build or walking out into the uncertainty of a new life. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes if you had been treated like garbage for 20 years. Would you have left then and there, or would you have stayed and fought? Once I smiled at her, the confusion on their faces was priceless because they were expecting tears or an apology, not the calm, terrifying peace of someone who no longer cares what their abusers think. I slowly stood up, my sweater dripping red onto the rug, and I didn't scream back. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the legal papers I had prepared, the divorce filings and the evidence of David's financial infidelity, and I laid them right on the table in front of him. The look on David's face shifted from irritation to pure, unadulterated panic, and I watched with grim satisfaction as he scrambled to understand how I could have possibly known about his secret accounts, his mistress, and the house he was trying to buy in someone else's name. I didn't say a word as I walked to the hallway, where I had already stashed my suitcase days before, and I grabbed my coat, turning back one last time to see Chloe standing there, the wine bottle still in her hand, looking like a little girl who had just realized her primary source of support was about to walk out the door forever. She tried to yell something, maybe an insult or a demand for me to stop, but the words died in her throat when she saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't anger, it was pity, and that hit harder than any slap ever could. I walked out the front door, the cold air hitting my face like a baptism, and as I got into my car and drove away from that manicured prison, I didn't feel lonely or scared. I felt like I was finally breathing for the first time in my adult life. The aftermath was swift and messy, involving lawyers and plenty of screaming, and while David tried to manipulate the narrative to make me look like the unstable, wine-drenched villain of the story, the evidence I had collected made it impossible for him to win. I walked away with half of the assets, enough to start over in a city where no one knew my name and no one expected me to play a role. And it turns out that without me there to manage their lives, both David and Chloe fell apart pretty quickly. David's company eventually caught wind of his financial mismanagement, and Chloe had to learn the hard way that she couldn't just throw a tantrum to get her way in the real world. And I heard through the grapevine that she spent the next year struggling to keep up the lifestyle she felt entitled to, only to realize that the person who made it possible was the only person who actually loved her. I don't regret walking out on Christmas Day because that was the moment I reclaimed my humanity, the moment I stopped being a prop and started being a person. And I've never looked back since. Looking at it now, I realize that the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to drown you in their own toxicity is to stay dry, keep your cool, and show them that they no longer have any power over you. Because the moment they lose their grip on your emotions, they lose everything. I've learned that life is too short to spend a single second trying to convince people to value you. If they can't see your worth, you don't need to scream, you just need to leave, and sometimes, the best way to handle a mess is to simply walk away from it, and let it finish falling apart on its own. I am finally at peace, living a life that is entirely my own, and while the memories of that day still linger, they don't haunt me. They serve as a reminder of how close I came to losing myself and how lucky I am that I found the courage to save me. If you've ever felt trapped by the expectations of your own family, I want you to know that you are not obligated to carry their burdens, and you are allowed to walk away from any situation that costs you your soul. Like this video if you are on my side, and if you believe that nobody should have to endure what I went through just to keep a family together. Subscribe for more stories like this where we unpack the messy, complicated realities of life, and finding our way back to ourselves. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Did I do the right thing? Or was there another way to handle my daughter and husband? I'll see you all in the next story.